in stage 38 we're going to start looking at the RC deck. This panel goes on here, roughly there, and all of the electronics sit on top of it. The cab will be fixed to the front here and hinges over the top of it. If you're new to building one of these, this is probably the one part where you need to give a little bit of thought, because it depends what electronic systems you are using as to how you're going to mount it on here. If you're using the Tamiya, just have a look, see if that's on camera, which it isn't, it would be there. If you're using the Tamiya, they give you diagrams telling you where to mount the MFC unit, the vibration unit if you're going to use it, and so on and so forth, and where to put a receiver. But of course I'm not using the Tamiya stuff, I'm using BIA. Now another thing is that Tamiya say if you fit the MFU unit you can't fit the dash and the driver and everything else that goes in there, and you have to black the windows out, which I think is a great shame on one of these vehicles. I find fitting the BIA units, which are more slimline than the MFC, and fitting them in the way that I do, there is just enough room to fit that, all the electronics in, and fit the seats, and fit the driver seats and dash and everything else, and then we can make a complete model then, because we can illuminate the dash and we can put a light in the cab as well, and put a backlight in the cab. There's so much you can do inside the cab, which it'd be a great pity if you just fit the MFU and then have to grey all the windows out. You might be able to see, I don't know, but I've already started to mark off some parts on here that I will be removing. This tray is going to be, I suppose the word's butchered, or modified really, a little bit, because my SFR unit fits on here, and I just need to take a bit off there to allow for the heat sink underneath at the front. In the instructions they will tell you to mount this plate here with spacers, which will make it even higher. I keep it as low as I possibly can, and I've even chopped a piece out the bottom there so that it doesn't foul the motor. So we're working, keeping things as low down as we can. There are several other parts here which I will be grinding off, which aren't needed. Quite honestly, the only bits that are needed are these 4 holes at the back, which is where the wheel arches fit, and that little one at the back corner there will be for the bottom of the exhaust stack, or it might even be air intake. That's on, beg your pardon, air intake, not exhaust stack. If you're fitting the support rod which holds the cab in place, you will need these 2 items here, and that one there is for an aerial. My aerials are internal, so I don't need that. I don't fit the support rod at all, more on that later. I use a strong cord of my own which allows the cab to tilt even more and allow you to get at the electronics should you need to do so. So before I get into stage 38, I will be taking this out to the garage and just using various tools to just remove the bits that I don't want. I'll then be assembling the rear arches, and then in 39 we'll be putting the air stack on, and then when we move on to 40 it will be attaching the whole of the electronics. So we're kind of departing a little bit away from the instructions here. Just a forerunner to stage 38. Here's my RC deck. I've removed all the various bits of ridges of plastic that I don't need, so that I can fit components on here flush onto the deck. I've cut down the piece that goes on the top here so that my control unit will fit where I want it to, and a little section over there because there is an item that goes in that corner there. Before we get that far though, I need to install both of the front mud flaps and pre-painted outside arches. Very few parts. We start by putting these items onto here. Let's get the right ones. It goes on there like that. I'm going to put a little bit of grease on these. They're very, very small screws. It'll just make them go in easier. Plus these screws aren't magnetic as well, so a little bit of help is appreciated. It's with that tight just to hold it in place. Just told you it's not magnetic, and I tried to make it stick on the screwdriver. Silly me. So much easier with just a little bit of grease on. There we go. That's that one. And looking at the deck, that goes on there. So I'm just going to put a couple of 3x8 screws in here. If you just start them, memory serves me rightly, you can get the arch into place. Like so. There we go. That's one in place. Excuse me. They go with the thicker part up at the top. Force of habit to put screws on the screwdriver. Interestingly, these wheel arches came on a red sprue. You can probably just see the red there. I painted them black as per the instructions. I think you'd want them in red anyway. There we go. That's the other one done, which goes on there. 2 screws. And that locks down into there. I will do once the screws pull them down. There we go. Quite tight. Job done. One other thing to do on this section, which I've already done, is to glue 2 nylock nuts, one in there, for the pins that hold that plate on the top. That's off a section further on, but I've done that in advance so I can work out where all of my electric stuff's going to go. We move straight on to stage 39. There is the air intake here, which goes on this way around, and this goes on here. And there's a little notch in there which locates with that peg there. All clever stuff. It's exactly where I want it. And that's held in place with a 2x8 screw, which is one of those. There we go. That's in place, and will marry up with the air intake stack when the cab rotates down. On your model, you might fit the cab support rod. That's connected to these 2 holes here. And in fact, I'll show it to you. It is. I've not fitted one of these for a long time. The main reason being that they don't allow the cab to come up very far. I much prefer to take a mounting point of my own back here and one on the cab, and I connect the 2 together with some very strong nylon cord that I've got, but I'll show you that later on. So I'm skipping that part of 39. So the only thing left to do now on 39 is to mount this onto that. And they're held in with 6 MD4s. So I'll just lose that for the moment. The motor cables are going through there. That all slots down there like that and drops into place. 2, 4, 6 screws. The only thing I didn't check on was whether they were thread locked or not. Nope. One. Easier with a screwdriver, wouldn't it? 2. 3, 4, 5, 6. Excuse me, quick sip of my tea. When I file this down, I just put a quick coat of black paint on the top of it as well, just to make it look a bit tidier. Those won't go in there, so I've got to use a smaller screwdriver to do these up. Is that going in? I think it is. Yes, it's gone in. Just back it off a touch. Put the one at the back on next. You've got 6 of these to do, so don't tighten them all up at once. Get them all screwed in first. So that one's gone tight, just loosen it off. You can see how my plate here fits quite close to the motor, but still clears it. That gives me an extra bit of height to install the cab. That one in there, that one's gone in, just loosen it off a touch. 2 more to go in the middle now. Believe it or not, this deck looks large, but it's actually smaller than the cab. The cab actually comes somewhere like here. I think we can get away with doing that one up now. Middle 2 are tight. 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 There we go, and I think that is stage 39 complete. Yep, that's stage 39 complete. Now stage 40 is for the fitment of the MFC unit, which I'm not doing. I'm fitting a rear unit, so that's of no interest to me. Stage 41 is fitting that, which I've already done. It carries on talking about the various parts for the MFC, which I'm not fitting, so I'll be skipping stage 40. 41 is all about putting the battery in and routing the battery cable round, which I'll do a little bit later. 42 is steering adjustment, which I've already done, and also making sure that each of the gears are correctly aligned, which I've also done. So really I need to look at the electronics for to go on here, and then I'll rejoin it at stage 43, which is where we start working on the cab. So that's it for now. Well, after stage 39, the last episode, it was a time to start fitting all of the electrics. You've seen this stuff when I've tested it earlier. I've now given thought to where I was going to put it, and I've fitted it onto the control deck. It's all held on with double-sided tape, so things could be moved or repositioned. I cut down the piece across the top, which was a bit wider, because there is a heat sink underneath the SFR1, and that allows it to go back far enough that it doesn't foul the front of the cab, and there is also sufficient room underneath for air to flow between it and the motor. Obviously you've got the SFR1 here, receiver here, and the two AKL8 units. I like to use these because they're nice and convenient for putting wires in. If you want to add any things or you get any faults, they just unplug dead easy, put a new one in, as the case may be. They are connected to the SFR1 using these ribbon cables. Now they're normally about 20 centimetres in length, which, 4 to 6 bananas. What I do is I cut them down. These two, as you can see, are literally no more than 2 inches long. It allows for neat installation, otherwise I've got a load of this ribbon that I'm trying to hide. The plugs do come apart if you're careful. You run them down the cable and clamp them back together, chop off the cable you don't need. Do it very carefully, methodically, and meter your wires afterwards to make sure that you've got connections from one end to the other end and that you've no short circuits between any other cables, which I've done on these here. My receiver, you've probably seen before, is the Radiolink R12DS, which is an 11 channel PWM. The 12th channel on it is for S-Bus. I'm using PWM. All the cables come round here. There's a little bit of excess cable which I can't do much about, so that's just bunched up there. The motor cables are the blue and the yellow, which I'm just looking to see if you can see. You can just see it on the screen. I use 5 amp electrical connectors, solder the end of the cables, or solder if you're in America, solder the cables, and I prefer to do it that way because if ever you need to change a motor, not that I ever have, you can easily unscrew that. What else have we got? I think there's 1 or 2 things that aren't yet connected. That's the input for the USB port, which is in here. That's so that you can plug it straight into the computer and talk to this via your PC. That's the standby switch, which is also in here. You'll notice I'm keeping all the cables flat because when you do that, there's just enough room for the seats to go over the top and the dashboard, which is obviously what I want to do. I'll show you underneath in a minute. In terms of the cab fits out in proportion to these. Those cables are kept back so that they don't foul the front of the unit. I don't use the stay that they put on here. I will generally put a hole somewhere over here and put a longer piece of, I have some industrial strength nylon cable which allows the cab to be tilted much more. Some of you will say, but it fouls the lower section here. True. I take those 2 screws out and I've got enough cable on them to just lower that to the deck, and then the front cab can tilt quite considerably and allows you to get at all the stuff. I think the problem with the Tamiya one is that it only goes about so far and you couldn't get at anything if you wanted to make any changes. The power cables go down underneath. I've used hot glue to hold them to the side of the chassis to keep them well away from any movement of the suspension. They go down here, and underneath I've hot glued it to the base of the gearbox. Here there is a Y connector because power also runs down the back for the boom, which is yet to be connected, so those cables are just loose at the moment. But that was quite a tight fit. There's my battery connector, so I can actually undo that from there. Just pull that down, gives me plenty of room to get at that. I'll put a screw in there. Because of the strength of these cables, it was just touching that, and I'm just keeping it well away from it. So that's the power side of things. I've wired up the cables, obviously for the USB and for the on-off switch, and tested it. It all works. The only one that I obviously haven't done anything with or tested yet is the, I'm just looking to see if it's on camera, are these 2. That is going to be the transmitter control of the boom, so you can control it from your TX, and that cable there is going to be one to use the switch to control it. So they're all just down to the back for the moment. I don't think there's anything else I need to mention on there. Just having a think. Aerials or antennas, that's why I put this side and not this side, because I've got slightly more room, and I've run the cables round on the plastic and round over here, and glued them to the underside of the plastic so we get good reception. Not that we've ever had a problem. I also cut a corner off this top plastic here so that those 2 were in line, because that's the back of the cab just there. So that's about it for this installation for now. I've tested motors and servos and speakers, all working, no problem at all, so I'm happy with that. The next stage now, stage 43 if I remember rightly, is the mirrors and some work on the cab. There's going to be a lot of work on the cab coming up because I want to put one of these illuminated logos in the back. There will be a cab light. I'm going to illuminate the dash, which is quite a bit of work. To do that as well. I bought some extra roof spots which aren't in this model kit, so those are going on, and also a couple of flashing beacons, and that there is a connector to channel 11 for my beacons, so that the beacons can be turned on and off separately but via the transmitter. So that's it. I hope you've enjoyed the build so far. Join me again soon with the cab.